What if the ocean's deepest depths hide horrors beyond our understanding? In the blackest corners of the sea, where no light dares to go, ancient creatures and unspeakable forces stir. Will you dare to dive into the abyss, or will you become another forgotten soul lost to its darkness? Have you ever wondered what lies in the blackness below where sunlight cannot reach? I used to think I didn't care to know, but then I joined the crew of the Erebus, a deep-sea research vessel tasked with exploring the Mariana Trench. The descent was uneventful at first. Hours passed in a dull haze of sonar pings and instrument checks as our submersible, Nautilus, plunged into the abyss. I was alone, piloting the vessel, my colleagues watching via live feed from the surface. The darkness beyond the glass was absolute, broken only by the occasional flicker of bioluminescent life. But then, something moved. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the mind playing tricks in the oppressive void. The sonar pinged, an anomaly registering briefly before vanishing. I squinted at the monitors, adjusting the external floodlights, and there it was, a massive rippling shadow just at the edge of visibility. "Are you seeing this?" I whispered into the comms. My voice was met with static and faint garbled replies. The connection, strained by the depth, was deteriorating fast. But then, the shadow drew closer. It wasn't a shadow, it was a mass of writhing tendrils, each the width of a train car, undulating with a sickening grace. The floodlights revealed a glistening texture, slimy, translucent, and pulsating as though alive with some inner rhythm. At its center was an enormous, unblinking eye, milky white yet disturbingly aware. I froze, the submersible shuddering as a low vibration reverberated through the water. The creature circled me, tendrils brushing against the hull with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. My instruments went haywire, pressure gauges spiking, oxygen levels plummeting. But then, the creature attacked. One tendril slammed into the vessel, sending it spinning in a dizzying spiral. I screamed, fumbling for the emergency controls. The glass cracked, a jagged web spreading across the viewport. Water began seeping in, freezing cold and reeking of salt and decay. I tried to ascend, desperate to escape, but the submersible's thrusters groaned in protest. Another impact came, this time accompanied by a guttural, otherworldly roar that resonated in my bones. The creature's eye locked onto me, and for a moment, I felt it, a presence in my mind, ancient and incomprehensible. It wasn't just hunting me, it was studying me. But then, it let go. As abruptly as it had appeared, the creature retreated into the darkness, taking the oppressive weight of its gaze with it. I was left adrift, the submersible barely holding together as alarms blared and water pooled at my feet. Somehow, I managed to stabilize the ascent and reached the surface, where the crew pulled me from the wreckage. No one believed what I saw. The recordings were scrambled, the sonar data inconclusive. They chalked it up to pressure-induced hallucinations, but I know the truth. Something watches from the deep, waiting in the blackness, and one day, it will rise. Why does the ocean glow in places where no light should exist? It was a question that led me to the Luma Project, a deep-sea expedition chasing unexplained bioluminescent phenomena. I thought it would be just another scientific curiosity. But then, we found the light. Our submersible, Iris, descended through layers of deep-sea murk. I was alone. and my colleagues monitoring the mission from the research vessel above. The waters darkened until the only illumination came from the vessel's floodlights, sweeping over desolate plains of silt and the occasional flash of startled fish. But then the glow appeared. It started faint, a soft, undulating blue in the distance. At first I assumed it was some kind of bioluminescent algae or perhaps jellyfish, but as I steered closer, the light grew stronger, brighter, almost hypnotic. It pulsed in a rhythmic pattern, unlike any natural phenomenon I'd ever studied. The monitors flickered, and static filled my earpiece. "Do you see that?" I asked, though I doubted anyone could hear me. I turned the submersible toward the source, my hands trembling slightly on the controls. But then, the glow shifted. It wasn't a stationary object. It moved with purpose, spiraling and circling in an intricate, almost deliberate dance. I realized the light wasn't coming from a creature, but from something around me. The water itself shimmered, as though infused with a living current of energy. "Oh, this isn't natural," I muttered to myself, trying to focus the external cameras. The light coalesced into shapes, vague and amorphous at first, then forming distinct outlines. Faces, dozens of them, glowing in eerie clarity, their eyes hollow and mouths agape in silent screams. But then they spoke. It wasn't a sound, but a vibration, resonating through the water and into the submersible. Words I couldn't understand clawed at the edges of my mind, fragments of an alien language that seemed to echo from deep within my own skull. The lights intensified, the faces pressing closer, surrounding the vessel. I panicked, gripping the controls as the submersible's systems began to fail. The lights dimmed inside the cockpit, the oxygen meter blinking a dire red. My vision blurred as the glow seeped through the cracks in the hull, crawling like tendrils of liquid fire. But then, I blacked out. When I woke, I was floating on the surface, the submersible nowhere in sight. The rescue crew said I must have ejected, though the safety protocols had never been activated. They couldn't explain how I had survived the crushing pressure of the depths. The others dismissed my story, attributing it to stress or oxygen deprivation, but I remember the light. Its cold, unrelenting touch, and the way it whispered truths no human should ever hear. I see it now, sometimes in the corner of my vision, a faint glow that follows me in the night. I was lucky to escape the first time, but I fear the glow has marked me, and one day it will return to claim me. Have you ever felt watched in a place where no one else could possibly be? That was the question gnawing at me as our team dove into an uncharted undersea cavern beneath the Antarctic ice. The sonar scans hinted at something massive living there, but then the cave swallowed us whole. Our submersible, Abyssal Echo, drifted through the narrow icy passage. I was one of 3 aboard, cramped and sweating despite the cold, while jagged stalactites hung like the fangs of some immense predator. As the light from the entrance faded behind us, the silence grew suffocating, broken only by the soft hum of our instruments. Then the sonar pinged. The signal bounced back stronger, louder than expected, and the monitor displayed an object. No, a void. Something huge ahead of us absorbed the sound waves completely. We should have turned back then, but curiosity drove us forward. The floodlights cut through the murk, illuminating an open chamber the size of a cathedral. And that's when we saw them. Teeth. Dozens of massive, bone-white spires jutted from the cavern floor, arranged in concentric circles. They gleamed like polished ivory, some broken and jagged, others sharp enough to split steel. At the center of the formation was a gaping maw carved into the earth, a pit descending into unknowable depths. It didn't look natural. It looked alive. But then the teeth moved. A low vibration rolled through the water, deep and guttural, shaking the submersible. The teeth shifted, scraping against each other with a sound that made my skin crawl. From the pit, a faint red light began to glow, pulsing like the heartbeat of a slumbering giant. "We need to leave," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The others hesitated, transfixed by the display, until the sonar screamed again. Something was rising from the pit, its bulk so vast it registered as an endless wall of shifting mass on the monitors. The floodlights caught a glimpse, a surface covered in rough, blackened scales, each larger than the submersible itself. And eyes. Dozens of glowing red eyes, arranged in unnatural patterns, blinked at us from within the mass. But then it attacked. A tendril-like appendage lashed out, smashing into the submersible and sending us spiraling. Alarms blared as cracks spiderwebbed across the viewport. The water pressure groaned against the weakened hull, threatening to crush us. Another strike, and our lights went out entirely, plunging us into complete darkness. I don't know how I survived. I woke up days later on the surface, rescued by a search crew. The abyssal echo was gone, and so were my crewmates. I tried to explain what happened, but no one believed me. They chalked it up to hallucinations and trauma. But I know what I saw. The teeth weren't just a structure. They were a warning. Something ancient and monstrous sleeps beneath the ice, and we were foolish enough to wake it. Now, when I close my eyes, I see the red glow. I hear the grinding of teeth, the low growl that shakes the ocean floor, and I know it's only a matter of time before it breaks free. Do you know what silence truly sounds like? I thought I did, until I ventured into the abyssal rift, a fissure in the ocean floor, deeper than anything on record. We called it the humming abyss because of the strange vibrations picked up by the hydrophones. But then, the humming began to change. Our submersible, Deep Star, was state-of-the-art, designed for the extreme pressures of the deep ocean. I was alone on this dive, descending into the rift while the team monitored from the surface. The first few hours were uneventful, just miles of barren seabed and the occasional cluster of pale, alien-like creatures drifting past the viewport. But then, I heard it. At first, it was a faint hum, low and rhythmic, almost soothing. It pulsed in perfect intervals, like the deep, resonant note of a far-off organ. I assumed it was a natural phenomenon, volcanic activity, or perhaps geothermal vents. But as I descended deeper, the sound grew louder, more intricate. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, almost musical. "Are you picking this up?" I asked into the comms. Static was my only reply. The hum filled the cabin now, vibrating through the metal walls and into my bones. The monitors flickered, and the submersible shuddered, as if caught in a current. But then, the humming became a voice. Not a voice in the traditional sense. It didn't speak words, but feelings. A deep, primordial sorrow bled into my mind, overwhelming me with an inexplicable grief. My hands trembled on the controls as I struggled to stay focused. The darkness outside the viewport thickened, and my floodlights seemed to dim, consumed by an unseen force. Then something emerged from the shadows. It wasn't a creature. not in the way we think of them. It was a shape, shifting and fluid, an amalgamation of darkness and light that pulsed in time with the hum. It enveloped the submersible, blotting out everything beyond the glass. My instruments went wild, readings spiking into impossible ranges. And then I saw them. Faces, hundreds of them, spectral and gaunt, swirling within the mass. They pressed against the glass, their mouths open in silent screams. Each face flickered briefly, then disappeared, replaced by another and another, a never-ending stream of lost souls. But then they looked at me. 1,000 eyes bore into me, their collective despair crashing over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't breathe. The air in the cabin felt thick and unyielding. My thoughts weren't my own anymore, filled instead with visions of vast cities drowned in darkness, ancient monoliths crumbling into the abyss, and endless, crushing silence. Just when I thought I would drown in their sorrow, the hum stopped. The masses withdrew, fading into the rift, leaving me alone in a dead, eerie stillness. The instruments stabilized, the floodlights flickered back to life, and I found myself drifting upward, as though some unseen force had released me. When I surfaced, I was incoherent, babbling about voices and faces. The team dismissed it as oxygen deprivation, a stress-induced hallucination. But I know the truth. The hum wasn't just sound, it was a warning. Something ancient and unfathomable lives in the rift, gathering the remnants of lost souls. And it let me go, not out of mercy, but as a harbinger. The humming abyss is alive, and one day it will call us all. Do you ever wonder if the deep ocean is just as vast and unknowable as space? That's the question that led me aboard the Event Horizon, a research vessel equipped with technology meant to bridge the gap between marine biology and astrophysics. We weren't looking for fish or coral. We were searching for anomalies in the quantum patterns of the sea. But then the anomaly found us. It started as a flicker on our instruments, a strange burst of energy coming from the Hadal zone, nearly 11,000 meters below the surface. The readings didn't match anything natural. No geothermal vent, no tectonic activity. It was artificial, designed. Our team deployed the Nereid, an unmanned drone, to investigate. I stayed in the command module, watching the live feed as it descended. The drone's cameras swept across the barren trench floor, the silence broken only by the occasional whir of its thrusters. Then, the flicker appeared. At first, it was just a distortion on the screen, a shimmering ripple, like heat rising from asphalt. But as the drone approached, the distortion resolved into a geometric shape, a perfect hexagon etched into the seafloor, glowing faintly with a silvery blue light. It pulsed, steady and deliberate, like a heartbeat. "Is this a structure?" I muttered, but no one had an answer. The hexagon wasn't made of rock or coral. It seemed metallic, though it defied analysis, our sensors unable to measure its density or composition. But then the drone stopped responding. The feed turned to static, the controls dead. We tried to recall the Nereid, but it was gone, vanished without a trace. And that's when the flicker spread. The hexagon wasn't alone. More shapes appeared in the darkness, emerging like stars from behind the cosmic veil. Circles, triangles, spirals, all glowing, all pulsating in an intricate alien rhythm. The shapes stretched across the trench floor, forming a pattern too vast and complex to comprehend. And then they moved. The shapes lifted from the sea floor, hovering in the water like living constellations. They folded and twisted in on themselves, morphing into impossible configurations. The light from their forms was blinding, but it wasn't just light. It was data. Streams of symbols and equations burned into my vision, too fast to process but leaving an imprint in my mind. "Turn off the instruments!" someone shouted, but it was too late. The lights aboard the event horizon flickered, the hum of the engines stuttering as if something was draining the power. The shapes began to rise, breaking free of the trench and heading straight for us. But then they stopped. Hovering just outside the vessel, the shapes hung there, silent and still. Through the observation window, I could see my own reflection, distorted in their surfaces. And then I realized they were watching us. Not with eyes, but with purpose, as if they were evaluating whether we were worth keeping. Without warning, they vanished, collapsing back into the trench in a cascade of light. The power returned, and the event horizon shuddered, as if released from a massive grip. We left immediately, abandoning the mission, but I haven't been able to forget what I saw. Those shapes weren't just objects. They were entities, intelligent, deliberate, and entirely alien. We've spent centuries looking to the stars for life, but we've been blind to the truth. The ocean isn't our unexplored frontier, it's their domain. Have you ever wondered if aliens could be hiding not in the skies, but in the oceans? That's what we were sent to find out. The Equatrix Project wasn't public knowledge, a classified mission funded by whispers of unidentified underwater phenomena. But then we found something. Our submersible, Nautilus 3, was equipped with advanced sensors designed to detect anomalies. Radiation spikes, magnetic distortions, even gravitational shifts. We descended into the Puerto Rico Trench, deeper than we had ever dared before. The water pressed against the hull, the weight of the ocean above almost tangible. Then the signal came. It started as a faint rhythmic ping, unlike any known marine life or geological activity. It wasn't random, it was repeating, mathematical. A language. We followed it deeper, the sound growing louder and sharper. And then we saw it. Beneath the sea floor, a massive structure glowed faintly, its surface covered in fractal patterns that shimmered in hues of green and gold. It wasn't natural. The lines were too precise, the angles too perfect. It looked like a city buried under millennia of silt and rock. We activated the high beam lights, and that's when the structure responded. The patterns on its surface shifted, flowing like liquid metal. The sound changed too, becoming a chorus of overlapping tones that resonated in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just noise, it was communicating with us. But then the lights in the submersible died. The cabin plunged into darkness, save for the eerie glow emanating from the structure below. The instruments went haywire, spinning into nonsense as a low vibration pulsed through the water. We were locked in place, unable to ascend or move, as if held by an invisible force. Then something rose from the structure. It wasn't a ship, not in the way we imagine. It was a mass of light and form, constantly shifting between shapes, triangles, spheres, spirals, all flowing seamlessly into one another. It moved with a grace that defied physics, its edges bending and refracting the water around it. And then it came closer. The cabin filled with a blinding light, and suddenly I wasn't in the submersible anymore. I was somewhere else, a vast expanse of nothing and everything. Voices or thoughts surged through me, speaking without words. They weren't human, they were ancient, calculating, and impossibly vast. They were the architects of the structure, watchers of our world, and perhaps something more. They showed me images, Earth, but not as we know it, oceans boiling, skies darkened, and a strange craft descending, shaping life into forms they saw fit. We weren't just being visited, we were an experiment. But then, they let me go. I woke in the submersible, gasping for air. The glow was gone, the structure now dormant, as if it had never been alive. The instruments stabilized, and we were able to surface. The others dismissed my experience, but I could see it in their eyes. They felt it too. Now back on land, I hear the pings sometimes, faint and far away. They're still there, watching from the depths, waiting for the right moment. We keep searching the stars for our creators, but they've always been here, hiding where no light can reach. Do you believe in the ninja? I didn't, not at first. A massive, pale humanoid creature, supposedly sighted by Japanese fishermen in Antarctic waters. It sounded like a ghost story to scare new crew members, but then we saw it. Our vessel, Arctic Voyager, was conducting research near a newly discovered undersea ridge. The cold was bone-chilling, and the water so dark it seemed to swallow the light. I was manning the night shift, monitoring sonar for unusual activity while the rest of the team slept. That's when the blip appeared. It was faint at first, a large mass moving slowly beneath the ship. I assumed it was a whale or an iceberg and logged the reading. But the sonar pinged again, and this time the shape had moved closer. Much closer. Too fast for ice. Too large for anything alive. Unidentified contact, port side, I reported into the radio. The reply was static, the storm overhead interfering with communications. I headed to the deck, peering out over the black waves. For a while there was nothing but the sound of the wind and the groaning ship. But then the water rippled. A pale, smooth surface broke through the waves. At first I thought it was ice, but then it moved. A slow, deliberate shift that revealed something enormous beneath. The moonlight caught on its featureless white skin, stretched taut like wet silk over bone. And then it turned toward me. It had no eyes, just a faint indentation where a face should be. Its head rose slowly, impossibly, towering above the deck. The thing exuded an unnatural stillness, as though the entire world had stopped to watch. Then it opened its mouth. The sound was low and guttural, more like the groan of shifting ice than anything organic. My legs buckled as the vibrations rattled the metal beneath my feet. It didn't move like an animal. It moved with intention, like it was studying me. And then it reached out. An arm, or something like an arm, emerged from the water. It was too long, bending and twisting in ways that made my stomach churn. The pale, smooth surface glistened as it stretched toward the ship, fingers ending in points too sharp to be flesh, their lashes glowing in the firelight. I stumbled back, shouting for help, but the storm swallowed my voice. The arm brushed against the railing, the metal screeching under its weight. Then, as quickly as it had come, it withdrew, sliding back into the depths. I pushed to my feet, keeping one hand up to smooth down the cloak of my armor. But it wasn't gone. The ship lurched violently, as if struck by something massive. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to the deck, their faces pale with confusion and fear. I pointed to the water. but all that remained was the churning sea and the echo of that low, mournful groan. In the morning, we found deep scratches along the hull, like claw marks carved into the steel. The official report blamed an underwater collision, but the crew knew better. The Ninjin isn't a myth. It's real, and it's watching. Some say it's a remnant of an ancient species, others a warning from the deep. All I know is that the ocean hides more than we'll ever understand. And whatever the Ningen is, it's not done with us yet.